Jerusalem. The word itself is a storm of devotion and blood. For centuries, pilgrims whispered its name in prayer, kings carved it into banners, and armies painted the earth red in their march toward it. But in the 12th century, this sacred city was more than a holy place. It was a frontier of faith, a wound in the heart of Christendom, and a beacon that drew knights from every corner of Europe. Imagine the roads leading to the Holy Sepulchre, dusty, lined with broken stones, haunted by raiders who struck pilgrims with the swiftness of wolves. Devout men and women crossed deserts and mountains, driven by belief, yet many never reached the shrine. They felt a thirst, to steal, to ambush. Out of this chaos, legends would later claim, emerged a new brotherhood, warriors who swore not only to fight but to protect. Not kings. Not lords. But knights bound by an oath of poverty and faith. They would ride beneath the sign of the Red Cross, their name carried like thunder across continents, whispered with awe, fear, and suspicion. This is where the story of the Knights Templar begins, at the crossroads of war and devotion, where piety sharpened into steel. The year is 1099. The First Crusade has torn through the Levant, leaving Jerusalem under Latin Christian rule. The city is a prize seized with fire and fury, but it is also an exposed jewel, glittering yet vulnerable. Behind its walls, the new Crusader kingdom clings to survival. Beyond them, the world seethes with hostility. Pilgrims flock to the Holy Land in unprecedented numbers. From France, England, the German states, they march in endless columns of hope. Yet their journey is fraught with peril. The deserts of Syria and Palestine are unforgiving, bandits and raiders lurk in every shadow. Stories spread like wildfire, families slaughtered, caravans burned, holy relics lost to bloodied sand. Jerusalem's rulers know their grip on the city is fragile. They can barely garrison their own castles, let alone patrol every pilgrim's path. The Crusader states, carved out of conquest, stand like islands in a hostile sea. Every rider who vanishes on the road, every murdered pilgrim, weakens their claim. It is in this atmosphere of danger and desperation that a small band of knights begins to act. Not under orders from kings or popes, but from a conviction that faith demanded steel. Hugh of Paynes, a minor French noble, steps into history with 8 companions. Their mission is simple yet revolutionary, to defend pilgrims on the road, to wield the sword not for land or wealth, but for God's travelers. They are poor, so poor that chroniclers later write of knights sharing a single horse between them. Their headquarters is no grand palace but a corner of Jerusalem's sacred precincts, offered by King Baldwin II himself, the Temple Mount. From this setting, the ancient seat of Solomon's temple, their name will be forged, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. In the beginning, they are little more than a curiosity. A handful of warriors swearing vows more suited to monks than men at arms. Poverty. Chastity. Obedience. Yet instead of cloistered silence, they choose the dust of the road, the clay of steel. For some, they seem holy guardians. For others, fanatics walking the edge between faith and madness. The early years are uncertain. Support trickles slowly. Pilgrims still fall prey to raiders. Skepticism surrounds the order. Why trust these ragged knights who claim to serve no king? But their persistence is their power. With each caravan they protect, with each pilgrim they deliver safely to Jerusalem's gates, their reputation begins to grow. By 1129, the Church takes notice. At the Council of Troyes, guided by the influence of Bernard of Clairvaux, the most powerful cleric of the age, the Templars are officially recognized. Their rule is formalized, a blend of monastic devotion and martial discipline. White mantles are draped over their shoulders, marked with the Crimson Cross. The image is unforgettable, warriors who look like monks, monks who fight like warriors. From the roads of Jerusalem, their legend spreads across Europe. To the faithful, they are knights of Christ himself, living proof that holiness can wear armor. To kings and lords, they are a force outside the usual feudal order, untamed by worldly allegiances. The Templars' rise has begun. From a handful of poor knights, they will soon become the most feared and admired brotherhood of their age. And yet, in their very origin lies the seed of mystery. For what truly happened within those early chambers on the Temple Mount? Chroniclers give few answers. Later centuries will whisper that the Templars found secrets beneath Solomon's ruins, treasures of faith, relics of power, knowledge forbidden. Were they simply soldiers with a vow? Or guardians of mysteries hidden since antiquity? For now, they are knights sworn to the road, protectors of pilgrims in a land of shadows. But the world they serve is restless, and forces far greater than themselves are already in motion. The Red Cross has been unfurled. The Templars' journey is underway. And the next chapter of their story begins not in Jerusalem's streets, but in the fortresses and battlefields where faith and empire will collide. The year is 1129. In a cold French winter, a gathering of clerics and nobles fills the halls of Troyes. Torches hiss and sputter in the damp air, casting flickering shadows on stone walls. Here, amid the murmurs of bishops and abbots, the fate of a small band of knights will be sealed. They arrive not as lords draped in silks, but as men of austerity, faces hardened by sun and sand, cloaks worn thin from years on Jerusalem's roads. At their head stands Hugh of Pains, carrying neither gold nor relics, only conviction. He and his companions are known as the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. Their mission, to guard pilgrims, to serve no king, no land, only God. But to survive, they need recognition. They need legitimacy. At the council presides Bernard of Clairvaux, monk, reformer, voice like fire. In his eyes, the fusion of monk and knight is not a contradiction but a revelation. To wield the sword in humility, to embrace poverty yet fight with ferocity, this, he argues, is sanctity reborn. He lends them his blessing, and with it, the church's. From that moment, the Templars are no longer wanderers on Jerusalem's roads. They are an order. Bound by a rule as strict as any monastery, yet carrying blades sharper than any abbey's pen. Their oath is their fortress. Poverty, chastity, obedience, vows familiar to monks, now bound to warriors. But the rule of the temple carries its own iron edge. No knight may retreat unless outnumbered 3-1. Their meals are plain, their clothing simple, their lives stripped of luxury. They are not permitted to hunt, gamble, or even decorate their weapons. Every detail of their existence is bent toward one purpose, service. And yet, beneath this austerity lies something magnetic. The sight of these knights, draped in white mantles marked with a red cross, captures imaginations across Christendom. They look like men who have cut ties with the world, soldiers who march with death already behind them. To many, they embody purity of purpose. To others, they appear unsettling, men outside feudal loyalty, sworn only to a higher authority. The order spreads swiftly. Castles and estates are gifted to them, villages tithe in their name. In Burgundy, Champagne, and England, donors hand over lands not merely for piety but for protection. For who could doubt the power of warriors sanctified by the Church? Templar preceptories rise like silent outposts across Europe. Each one is part monastery, part military garrison, and part training ground. Behind their walls, new recruits are drilled in obedience, their egos stripped away. In the courtyard, squires spar with blunted swords, learning to fight not for glory but for the brotherhood. Within the chapel, voices chant psalms before dawn, discipline measured not just in arms but in prayer. Still, the vow of poverty defines them. Their possessions belong to the order, not to the man. Knights wear plain wool, their feasts consist of bread, meat, and watered wine. Chroniclers write of 2 Templars riding one horse, a symbol of their humility. Whether myth or truth, the image endures. This humility, paradoxically, becomes their greatest strength. In an age when knights often fought for plunder and land, the Templars appear incorruptible. They are warriors not distracted by wealth, monks not confined by cloisters. To fight and to pray, this is their dual identity, their paradoxical power. And yet, beneath the vows and rituals, the order also forges an unspoken brotherhood. On the battlefield, they ride in tight formation, a wall of shields and lances, trained to act as one. To break ranks is dishonor. To desert is damnation. In the chaos of war, when banners fall and armies scatter, the Templars hold their line. In Europe, their mystique grows. They become the stuff of sermons, symbols of God's will made flesh. Bernard himself pens his famous treatise in praise of the new knighthood, portraying them as warriors who kill without sin, because they kill not for themselves but for Christ. In these words, their image crystallizes: the holy sword, the monk in armor. Yet their path is not free of suspicion. Some whisper that this fusion of monk and knight distorts both vocations. Monks should not spill blood. Knights should not deny wealth. To many, the Templars represent a dangerous crossing of boundaries. But Bernard's defense silences the doubts, for now. By the 1130s, their reputation is unstoppable. Pilgrims across the Mediterranean seek their protection. Kings and nobles court their favor. Castles rise in the Levant under their banner, fortresses carved into rock and desert, standing as sentinels on hostile frontiers. The white mantle with the red cross becomes a sigil of trust and dread, depending on which side of the battlefield one stands. But within this growing power, a subtle transformation takes root. The order that swore poverty begins to attract wealth. Donations pour in, lands, coin, even entire villages pledged to the temple. What began as an oath of austerity becomes the foundation of something much larger, an institution that will not only fight wars but shape economies, politics, and the very structure of Christendom. The knights still kneel in prayer, still eat their plain meals, still ride two to a horse. But around them, their treasuries swell, their castles multiply, their influence stretches like a web across Europe and the Holy Land. The oath remains, but the world around it is already changing. And soon, the poor fellow soldiers will no longer be seen merely as humble protectors of pilgrims. They will become bankers, warlords, and power brokers, indispensable, untouchable, and feared. The order has been born. Its vows are its heart. But the road ahead will demand more than devotion, it will demand an empire of its own. The Levant burns beneath a relentless sun. Across the desert horizon, the outlines of castles rise like mirages, stone bulwarks against a hostile sea of empires. It is the mid-12th century, and the Crusader states cling to existence, fragile kingdoms carved by the sword. Every caravan, every fortress, every rider on the road carries the weight of survival. Here, the Knights Templar come into their own. No longer a handful of poor guardians on Jerusalem's roads, they are now the mailed fist of Christendom in the East. On the frontier, their castles are both sanctuary and spear. At Gaza, Safed, and Tortosa, their walls stand against endless assaults. The mightiest of all is Croix de Chevaliers, though eventually held by the Hospitallers, it symbolizes the fortified frontier. The Templars build their own masterpieces of stone, including the mighty fortress at Safeda, its towers looming like silent watchmen over the landscape. These are not simple outposts but entire worlds of stone and faith, chapels, granaries, armories, and barracks designed to withstand sieges that might last years. Within these walls, discipline is absolute. At dawn, the bugle call summons the brethren to prayer, then to drill. Horses are fed before knights take their bread, for the steed is the companion of survival. Armor is polished not for vanity but for readiness. Every lance, every shield, every wall must be prepared, for the enemy is never far. And the enemy comes often. Saracen raiders test the roads, swift as falcons. At Hattin, Ascalon, and countless nameless skirmishes, the Templars ride at the vanguard. Their tactics are ruthless in their simplicity, a wall of cavalry, lances lowered, charging in silence until the ground itself trembles. Chroniclers describe them as unbreakable. When others waver, the Templars hold. When armies falter, they form the shield wall that buys time. Their valor becomes legend, but it is bought in blood. Entire companies vanish on the battlefield, fighting to the last rather than yield. Defeat does not tarnish their reputation, it sharpens it. To die as a Templar is not loss but sacrifice. Their graves scatter the Levant like seeds, each cross-marked stone a reminder that the order does not retreat, it endures. Yet their role is not only war. The Templars are guardians of the lifelines that keep the Crusader states alive. Pilgrims who once traveled in fear now march in columns under Templar escort. Caravans of grain, wine, and weapons move behind their banners, the lifeblood of Jerusalem's survival. To strike a pilgrim under Templar protection is to invite wrath swift and absolute. This dual identity, as warriors and protectors, creates a mystique that spreads back across Europe. Tales of their ferocity and devotion are carried by returning pilgrims, by letters, by troubadours who turn their exploits into verse. In distant monasteries, monks pray for the Templars' battles. In royal courts, kings whisper of their power. The white mantle with its crimson cross becomes an icon of hope for Christendom and a symbol of dread for their enemies. But with fame comes envy. Other knights covet their discipline. Lords resent their independence. Even among the Crusader states, tensions rise. The Templars swear allegiance only to the Pope, not to local kings or princes. This makes them powerful allies, but also dangerous rivals. When strategy divides, they hold their own counsel. In battle, their refusal to retreat can save an army or doom it to ruin. Their devotion is tested most fiercely in the great confrontations of the age. At the Battle of Montgessart in 1177, when Saladin himself leads a host that outnumbers the Crusaders by tens of thousands, it is the Templars who hurl themselves into the storm. Against impossible odds, they help turn near-certain annihilation into miraculous victory, scattering the Sultan's forces and preserving the Kingdom of Jerusalem. But victories are fleeting. At Hattin in 1187, the sun burns mercilessly on Crusader helmets as Saladin surrounds the Christian army. Exhausted, parched, and trapped, the knights fall one by one. The Templars fight with grim resolve, but the battle becomes a slaughter. Captured knights are offered no ransom. Saladin orders their execution, seeing them as the sharpest blade of his enemy. Hundreds are beheaded, their white mantles soaked in crimson. It is a wound from which the order will never fully recover. And yet, even in loss, their legend only deepens. Survivors carry tales of Templar steadfastness back to Europe, stories that inspire new crusades, new donations, new recruits. The order becomes a cycle of sacrifice and renewal, spending its blood in the East, replenished by devotion in the West. Templar fortresses remain the last to fall. At Acre, at Gaza, at Tortosa, their garrisons hold out long after others have fled. When walls crumble, they fight in the streets, swords ringing against stone. When cities burn, they form the rearguard, shielding civilians and fellow soldiers in desperate retreat. For decades, they are the living line between Christendom and its enemies, a brotherhood defined not by survival but by endurance. Still, in their rise, shadows linger. Pilgrims whisper that the Temple Knights know secrets hidden beneath Solomon's ruins. That their vigilance is not only for men and roads, but for relics buried deep in Jerusalem's soil, fragments of the true cross, the Ark of the Covenant, treasures that might grant divine power. Whether myth or truth, the aura of mystery clings to them, as unshakable as the red cross on their mantles. By the end of the 12th century, the Templars are more than warriors. They are guardians of Christendom's dream in the East, symbols of faith forged in blood and stone. But the dream itself begins to fracture. The Holy Land trembles under Saladin's resurgence. Jerusalem is lost. The Crusader states shrink into desperate enclaves along the coast. The Guardians now find themselves trapped in a paradox. They are stronger than ever in wealth and renown, yet the very land they swore to protect is slipping through their fingers. The Templars will not abandon their post. Their oath binds them still. But the storm is gathering, and the battles to come will test not only their strength but the very meaning of their existence. The Crusader kingdoms are outposts in a hostile land, thin strips of territory along the Levantine coast, cut off from Europe by seas and deserts. To hold them requires more than bravery. It requires fortresses, stone lungs through which the fragile Crusader states can breathe. And no order builds, mans, and defends them with greater intensity than the Knights Templar. From the cliffs above the Mediterranean to the mountains of Galilee, their strongholds rise like jagged teeth of Christendom. Safed, Bagras, Tortosa, names etched into the chronicles of war. And most formidable of all, their citadel at Lit, a fortress whose walls plunge directly into the sea, designed so even the waves themselves seem enlisted in its defense. These are not castles for show, they are machines of survival. Their walls are thick enough to swallow the fury of siege engines. Their towers command the roads like watchful eyes, their chapels echo with hymns that mingle with the clatter of steel. Inside, the rhythm of life fuses monastic devotion with military rigor. Dawn bells call the brothers to prayer, and before the last syllable of the song fades, the clang of armor begins. Blacksmiths hammer out sparks that light the courtyards like stars. Horses snort in the stables, their flanks brushed and saddled as if war might come at any moment. The Templars live in readiness, for them, idleness is sin. On the battlefield, this discipline becomes legend. When Templar cavalry rides, it is like the striking of a single blade, sharp and merciless. They do not scatter in pursuit of plunder, they advance as one, their lances leveled like the teeth of a comb. Chroniclers marvel at their silence before the charge, broken only by the thunder of hooves and the shattering impact of steel on flesh. Unlike mercenaries, they are bound not by coin but by oath. And that oath, to never yield except when outnumbered 3-1, makes them terrifying opponents. To their allies, the Templars are a wall of faith. To their enemies, they are the storm. Saladin himself learns to fear them. In raids and in pitched battles, he sees their stubborn refusal to break. Yet he also recognizes their danger, not in strength alone, but in their role as the soul of Christian resistance. When Saladin takes Jerusalem in 1187, he makes a chilling decision: captured Templars will not be ransomed. They are executed, their blood staining the sands outside the city, for the Sultan knows that to release them is to unleash the same sword against him once more. The image of Templars dying en masse rather than renouncing their oaths spreads like wildfire through Europe. In the eyes of Christendom, their sacrifice elevates them from knights to martyrs. Songs and sermons speak of their valor. In villages far from the Holy Land, peasants whisper their names as if invoking saints. Yet this glorification carries a hidden weight, the expectation that they are invincible, that they will always stand where others fall. With each fortress they raise, each field they defend, the Templars grow not only in legend but in power. Their resources expand through Europe's donations. Gold from English nobles, vineyards in Burgundy, mills in the Rhineland, all flow into their treasury, feeding the war effort in the East. The white mantle with the crimson cross becomes more than a uniform. It is a brand recognized from London to Antioch. But power breeds complexity. Within the Crusader states, politics twists around the Templars like vines. Kings and princes seek their counsel, yet resent their independence. The order answers only to the Pope, and this places them outside the hierarchy of local rule. At times, they act as trusted advisors, at others, as dangerous meddlers. In battles where strategies differ, the Templars follow their own code. Their refusal to retreat can save the day, or doom an army to destruction. This tension comes to a head in moments of disaster. The Battle of Hattin, 1187, a blazing July sun beats down as the Crusader host, desperate and parched, is encircled by Saladin's forces. The Templars fight with unshakable resolve, but the heat, thirst, and overwhelming numbers crush them. Hundreds of knights are cut down or captured. It is a catastrophe that reshapes the Holy Land, breaking Christian control of Jerusalem itself. Yet even in the ashes of defeat, the Templars endure. Those who survive retreat to the coastal fortresses. From there, they mount counterattacks, harass supply lines, and prepare for the next crusade. Where kings abandon the field, where nobles quarrel and retreat to Europe, the Templars remain. Their castles, battered but unbroken, stand like the last teeth of resistance. Life inside those fortresses is a crucible of faith and fear. A siege could last months, even years. Arrows and stones rain down endlessly, food dwindles, disease festers. And yet the rule allows no surrender unless all hope is gone. Chroniclers record garrisons holding until walls collapse beneath them, knights fighting in the rubble, their mantles turned red not by cross but by blood. To be a Templar in a fortress under siege is to stare into the abyss, knowing that martyrdom is not a possibility but an expectation. Still, their defiance inspires. In Europe, their legends swell beyond reality. The Templars become the embodiment of Christendom's struggle, a brotherhood both admired and feared. Pilgrims wear small crosses in imitation. Young nobles dream of joining their ranks. Kings court their friendship, even as they fear their independence. By the close of the 12th century, the Templars are more than an order. They are an institution woven into the very fabric of Crusader society. Their fortresses are the anchor points of the Latin East, their cavalry the sharpest weapon in Christendom's arsenal. But their survival comes at a cost. Every fortress lost, every knight executed, every treasure sent from Europe deepens their reliance on wealth and politics. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ are no longer merely poor. Their coffers swell, their influence spreads, their presence stretches from the deserts of Palestine to the cathedrals of Paris. The sword and the cross remain their symbols. Yet the fortress, the stone heart of their power, becomes their true legacy. And soon, it is not only on the battlefield that their strength will be felt. A new role is emerging for. Across the fields of Europe, church bells toll. Cathedrals rise skyward, their spires piercing clouds like prayers cast in stone. Kings march to war, merchants sail to trade, and pilgrims still set their faces toward the Holy Land. Yet in this medieval world of chaos and distance, one question persists: how does one move wealth safely across kingdoms where brigands haunt the roads and oceans teem with pirates? The answer, increasingly, is the temple. By the mid-12th century, the Knights Templar have become more than warriors. Their reputation for incorruptibility, their network of commanderies across Europe and the Levant, and their vow of poverty make them uniquely suited to a role no one had foreseen, guardians not only of pilgrims' bodies, but of their money. It begins simply. A pilgrim about to embark for Jerusalem leaves his gold and silver with a Templar house in Paris or London. In return, he receives a coded letter, a kind of medieval promissory note. Upon reaching the East, he presents it to the brethren in Acre or Jerusalem and receives the equivalent value in coin. Thus, he travels unburdened, safe from thieves, his wealth guarded by the Red Cross. This innovation spreads like wildfire. Merchants soon follow pilgrims' example. Kings, too, discover the convenience of Templar vaults. Their treasure is safer in a temple strongroom than in a royal castle, which might burn or be sacked in war. And with treasure comes trust, with trust, power. Templar preceptories, once humble farmsteads and training grounds, become financial hubs. Behind their walls, ledgers are inked with precise lines, tallying rents, harvests, donations, and deposits. Fields of wheat, herds of sheep, vineyards heavy with grapes, all yield revenue that flows into the temple's coffers. The order, though sworn to poverty as individuals, becomes one of the richest institutions in Europe. Yet their wealth does not glitter. It is hidden in plain sight, landholdings, mills, and churches scattered across the continent. The brothers still eat simple meals, still sleep in bare dormitories, still wear coarse wool. But behind their austere image lies a system of financial ingenuity, loans to nobles, credit for kings, and the management of estates so vast that they rival entire duchies. By the reign of King Henry II of England, the Templars are already acting as royal bankers. Taxes flow through their hands, crusade funds are collected and safeguarded in their treasuries, and ransoms for captured kings, such as Richard the Lionheart, are coordinated by their network. In Paris, the temple's headquarters becomes a fortress within the city, its walls sheltering not just knights but the wealth of monarchs. To contemporaries, it is both miraculous and unsettling. Monks are not meant to meddle in coin. Knights are not meant to balance books. Yet the Templars do both, and with an efficiency that no secular power can rival. Still, the system carries risks. When kings borrow, repayment is rarely certain. Loans meant to fund crusades often vanish into the sands of mismanagement or the blood of lost battles. Yet the Templars persist, for to deny a king is to court danger, and to refuse the call of Christendom is to betray their mission. The paradox deepens. An order founded on poverty becomes synonymous with wealth. An order born to shed blood for pilgrims now manages rents, tithes, and royal treasuries. Critics whisper that the Templars have grown worldly, that their vows conceal ambitions of power not merely on the battlefield but in the courts of kings. Their secrecy only fuels suspicion. Within the order, financial operations are handled with the same discipline as military campaigns. Notebooks are guarded, decisions kept within the chapter house. To outsiders, the temple seems impenetrable, its wealth invisible yet omnipresent. Rumors blossom that they hide vast hoards beneath their commanderies, that their treasure vaults contain not merely coin but relics and ancient knowledge. Yet there is no denying their necessity. In an age where kings fall and kingdoms collapse, the Templars remain. Their continuity, their stability, makes them indispensable. They are not bound by bloodlines that can die out, nor by crowns that can be toppled. They answer only to the Pope, and thus rise above the quarrels of lords. For merchants, they are safety. For pilgrims, protection. For kings, a treasury on which to lean. And so their role expands. They finance crusading expeditions, secure the payment of armies, and even become arbiters in disputes between monarchs. Their commanderies, scattered like stars across Christendom, create a network of communication and exchange rivaling that of any kingdom. But wealth breeds envy. Other orders, like the Hospitallers, cannot match the Templars' financial reach. Secular lords grow uneasy at their independence. And kings, once grateful borrowers, begin to see the temple not merely as a sanctuary but as a rival. In the shadows of cathedrals and courts, resentment stirs. Still, for now, the Red Cross flies high. Their role as bankers does not diminish their ferocity in war. When called, the Templars ride as before, disciplined, relentless, bound by oath. But now their swords are backed by coffers, their lances by ledgers. They are no longer simply guardians of the Holy Land. They are the infrastructure of crusading itself. And yet, in this transformation lies danger. For while castles may withstand sieges, while knights may fight with courage, wealth is vulnerable in subtler ways. Coin can be seized. Debt can be twisted into accusation. Influence can draw suspicion. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ, once beggars sharing horses, now hold the purses of kings. Their empire of stone and steel is joined by an empire of numbers and trust. It makes them powerful. It makes them indispensable. And, in time, it will make them hated. For the temple's enemies are not only beyond the walls of Jerusalem, but within the courts of Europe itself, where thrones grow restless under the shadow of the Red Cross. The 13th century dawns with Jerusalem no longer the radiant prize of Christendom, but a ghost city whose possession shifts like sand in the desert wind. Once the crown of the Crusader dream, the holy city is now scarred by betrayal, sieges, and uneasy truces. Its stones echo not only with prayers but with the clamor of broken promises. For the Knights Templar, this is the heart of their paradox. They were born to guard the pilgrim's road to Jerusalem, to hold the sacred city as Christendom's citadel. Yet by 1244, the city has slipped from Christian hands for the final time, seized by Khwarezmian mercenaries allied with the Ayyubids. Its churches are desecrated, its relics scattered, its walls drowned in fire. For the Templars, the loss is more than a defeat, it is the unraveling of their original purpose. And yet they cannot abandon the East. From Acre to Sidon, from Cyprus to Tripoli, they cling to what remains of the Crusader states. Their fortresses rise higher, their defenses harder, but the heart of their mission, the guardianship of Jerusalem, is gone. A shadow falls over their vow, and with it, doubt. The battlefield itself begins to change. No longer are crusades driven by the fiery zeal of the First Crusade, when Europe poured knights across the seas. Now kings weigh the costs, nobles hesitate, and papal calls ring hollow in lands weary of endless wars. Crusading has become a burden, a tax, a political gamble. Where once the Templars were the spearhead of an unstoppable tide, they now fight as the shield of a retreating dream. The enemies pressing against them are not only Saladin's heirs but new forces rising from the east. The Mongols thunder into the Middle East, their hooves shaking the earth, their armies toppling caliphates. For a fleeting moment, the Crusaders dreamed that these horse lords might become unlikely allies against Islam. But alliances are fragile, and the Mongol storm is unpredictable. When the dust settles, the Templars remain surrounded, their castles isolated, their manpower stretched thin. Inside their strongholds, the order grows increasingly insular. Their rituals, their secrecy, their strict discipline, once sources of awe, now breed whispers. Pilgrims and chroniclers alike begin to murmur, what truly happens behind the stone walls of the temple? Do they guard relics beyond imagination? Do they cling to secrets unearthed beneath Solomon's temple? The more their fortunes waver, the more suspicion grows. Meanwhile, Europe changes. Monarchs consolidate power, building centralized states where once feudal lords held sway. The Templars, with their independent wealth and international reach, stand apart from this new order. They answer only to the Pope, not to kings. This independence, once their greatest protection, now paints them as outsiders in the very lands they helped defend. On the coast of the Levant, their last bastions become crucibles of desperation. Acre becomes the new heart of Christendom in the east, a city of traders, pilgrims, soldiers, and intrigue. Here the Templars construct their most formidable fortress yet, a vast compound of towers and halls that dominates the harbor. Its walls gleam white in the Mediterranean sun, a symbol that the temple still endures. Yet beneath its grandeur lies fragility. Acre is a crossroads of greed and rivalry. Venetians and Genoese quarrel over docks, merchants scheme, and Christian factions feud even as enemies mass beyond the horizon. The Templars stand in the midst of this turbulence, guardians, financiers, soldiers, and sometimes pawns in greater games. Their discipline remains unshaken, their vows intact, but the world around them is shifting. They were created to serve a cause larger than themselves, the defense of Jerusalem. Now that cause is fractured, and the Red Cross is carried more as a memory than as a banner of victory. In battle, their courage never falters. Chronicles still recount their charges, their last stands, their refusal to surrender. Yet bravery cannot replace numbers. Each loss cuts deeper, each defeat harder to recover from. The order bleeds knights faster than Europe can send replacements. The shadow grows darker still in 1291, when the Mamluks under Sultan al-Ashra Khalil march upon Acre. The city becomes the final fortress of the Crusader dream. Its walls tremble beneath siege engines, its harbor fills with fire, its streets run with panic. The Templars fight with their old ferocity, holding their quarter of the city to the last. When Acre falls, they retreat into their fortress, barricading themselves as towers collapse around them. Chroniclers say they fought until the sea itself threatened to swallow the stones. Only when fire and rubble left no escape did the survivors fall, blades in hand, into martyrdom once more. With Acre's fall, the Crusader states are extinguished. The Holy Land is gone. The dream of Christendom in Jerusalem is broken. For the Templars, exile becomes reality. Their headquarters shifts to Cyprus, but the island is no Holy Land. From its shores they gaze across the Mediterranean toward the coast they can no longer reach. Their vows bind them to a mission now made impossible. The shadows over Jerusalem become shadows over the order itself. Without the Holy Land, what are the Templars? Their castles remain, their wealth endures, but their sacred justification falters. Kings in Europe begin to ask what purpose they serve, why their coffers swell while Christendom's armies shrink. The Templars remain knights. They remain guardians. But their identity is slipping, like sand through the cracks of the very city they were sworn to protect. And in that widening gap, between what they were and what they have become, the seeds of suspicion, envy, and betrayal begin to take root. The Mediterranean sun blazes over the port of Acre in the spring of 1291, but beneath its brightness hangs a darkness that all can feel. The sea is crowded with ships, some bringing reinforcements, others poised to flee. Within the city walls, pilgrims clutch relics, merchants guard their goods, and soldiers sharpen blades they know may never taste victory. Acre is the last great outpost of Christendom in the Holy Land, the final flame flickering before the storm extinguishes it. The storm comes in the form of the Mamluk Sultan El-Ashraf Khalil. His army, vast and relentless, descends upon the city like a tightening noose. Siege towers, catapults, and legions of warriors press against Acre's walls, their chants rolling like thunder across the plains. The defenders, Templars, Hospitallers, Teutonic Knights, and common Crusaders, brace for impact, but deep inside they know this is not a siege to be endured. It is a reckoning. The Templars stand at the heart of the defense. Their fortress, a massive citadel that dominates the harbor, becomes both shield and beacon. Within its walls, discipline remains absolute. They pray, they arm, they prepare to die as they had sworn. Chroniclers tell of their white mantles moving through smoke like ghosts, rallying panicked civilians, leading desperate charges at the gates, striking from breaches already cracked by Mamluk engines. For weeks, the city holds. But the weight of the Mamluks is irresistible. Each night, towers fall. Each dawn, new assaults batter the walls. Blood runs in the streets, mingling with the cries of women and the clash of steel. Venetian and Genoese ships lie waiting in the harbor, lifelines for the wealthy and the fortunate. Yet many knights refuse escape. To leave Acre is to abandon their vow, to betray the temple. On May 18th, the walls finally shatter. The Mamluks pour through in waves, their banners unfurling over broken battlements. Chaos consumes Acre. Houses burn, churches collapse, and the streets become rivers of flight and slaughter. Still, the Templars refuse to yield. Retreating to their citadel by the sea, they bar the gates and turn it into a last island of defiance. For 10 days more, the fortress stands alone, surrounded by fire and ruin. From its towers, the knights hurl stones and boiling pitch, their crossbows darkening the sky with bolts. At night, the chants of the Mamluks echo across the rubble, answered by hymns rising from within the temple walls. Survivors of the city, soldiers, women, children, crowd inside, clinging to the knights as their final shield. But walls, no matter how strong, cannot withstand forever. The Mamluks dig beneath the citadel, their tunnels gnawing at its foundations. On the 11th day, the ground trembles. With a thunderous roar, part of the fortress collapses into dust and fire. Those within make their last stand. Chroniclers describe the scene with awe, the Templars fighting until flames devour them, until stones crush them, until the sea itself claims what remains. The citadel falls. Acre is lost. And with it, the Crusader states vanish from the map. The loss reverberates across Christendom like a funeral bell. In Rome, in Paris, in London, church bells toll, sermons thunder, and processions march in mourning. Yet beneath the sorrow lies exhaustion. For 2 centuries, Europe has poured men and treasure into the East. Now, with Acre gone, the dream of retaking the Holy Land seems like ashes carried by the wind. For the Templars, the fall is more than military defeat, it is an existential wound. Their very identity had been bound to Jerusalem, to the Pilgrim's Road, to the defense of Christendom in the East. With Acre's fall, that mission is stripped from them. They retreat to Cyprus, building new quarters on the island, their red cross still flying. But to many in Europe, the order's purpose has evaporated. Yet their wealth and power remain. Their fortresses in France and England still stand, their banking networks still hum with gold, their lands still stretch across Christendom. Without Jerusalem to defend, their independence and riches begin to cast a different light. Where once they were heroes, they now appear as an order apart, untethered, untouchable, perhaps even unnecessary. The world they inhabit has shifted. Kings no longer dream of holy conquest, they dream of taxation, armies, and sovereignty. Monarchs look upon the Templars not as brothers in arms but as rivals, sitting upon treasure that might fuel royal ambitions. And where envy takes root, suspicion soon follows. From the ashes of Acre, a new chapter begins, not of battlefield glory, but of whispers, accusations, and traps laid by kings and sanctioned by popes. The Templars' greatest trial is no longer the sword of the Mamluks. It is the politics of Europe. And soon, their fortress will not be stone walls in Acre, but fire in Paris. Cyprus becomes the reluctant sanctuary of the Templars after Acre's fall. Their banners still fly, their drills still echo, but the island is a cage rather than a kingdom. From here, the knights plan campaigns that never come, dream of Jerusalem though it is forever lost. Their castles in Europe remain strong, their coffers deep, their discipline unbroken. And yet, far from the shores of the Levant, their greatest enemy is already stirring, not in armor, but in robes and crowns. The year is 1305. France is the heart of Christendom's politics, and upon its throne sits King Philip IV, Philip the Fair. His gaze is cold, his ambition sharp, and his treasury empty. Years of war with England and Flanders have drained his kingdom's wealth. In his mind, the solution gleams brightly, the riches of the temple. Across the Alps, a new pope rises, Clement V, installed not in Rome but in Avignon. His papacy is already entwined with French power. Philip's hand reaches deep into the church, and Clement owes his position to the king's support. In this new alignment of crown and papacy, the Templars stand dangerously exposed. For decades, their independence had been their shield. They answered only to the Pope, their rule beyond the reach of kings. But now, when the papacy itself bends to royal will, that shield begins to crack. The Templars, wealthy, disciplined, and untouchable, look less like defenders of Christendom and more like a threat to royal authority. Whispers begin to spread, carefully seated, darkly suggestive. Are the Templars truly holy warriors, or heretics cloaked in piety? Do they worship Christ, or strange idols whispered about in taverns and courts? The order's secrecy, once a source of mystique, now becomes a weapon used against them. Their initiation rites, their closed chapters, their silence to outsiders, all become fertile ground for suspicion. Philip moves with cunning precision. First, he tests the waters, hinting at reforming the military orders, perhaps merging the Templars with the Hospitallers under a crown-friendly leadership. The Templars resist. They will not surrender their independence, nor bend their oath to royal command. With every refusal, Philip's resolve hardens. Then comes the snare. On October 13, 1307, a date that will haunt legend, Philip strikes. Across France, before dawn, his soldiers fan out, descending upon Templar commanderies in a single, coordinated sweep. Knights are dragged from their beds, their treasures seized, their leaders shackled in chains. The charges are as shocking as they are grotesque: heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, even obscene rites of initiation. The most disciplined order in Christendom is branded as traitors to Christ himself. Pope Clement hesitates. The accusations are monstrous, the evidence flimsy. Yet Philip is relentless. He presses, threatens, cajoles. Soon, papal authority bends beneath royal pressure. What began as a French purge becomes an inquisition sanctified by the Church. Across Europe, the Templars are hunted. In dungeon chambers lit by flickering torches, knights are tortured. Some confess under agony, confessions twisted, contradictory, later recanted. Yet in the court of public opinion, the damage is done. The mystique of the Templars turns against them. Their secrecy, their wealth, their failure to defend the Holy Land, all are woven into a tapestry of suspicion. For commoners, merchants, and nobles alike, it becomes easier to believe that an order so mighty must surely have fallen to corruption. The trap is sprung. In Paris, the Grand Master Jacques de Molay is imprisoned. He is no young crusader but an old man, scarred by years of war, now facing an enemy he cannot meet on the battlefield. Alongside him, commanders and brothers await judgment not by sword but by tribunal. The political stakes are clear. For Philip, the destruction of the Templars means seizing their wealth, neutralizing their independence, and asserting royal power over church and knight alike. For Clement, it means survival, maintaining papal authority while shackled to the ambitions of France. Between these forces, the order that once guarded Jerusalem finds itself defenseless. And yet, in the midst of trial and torment, the Templars cling to their dignity. Many refuse to confess, even under torture. Others retract their words, declaring their innocence with their last breath. Their silence under fire only deepens the aura of mystery around them. Did they hide truths too dangerous to reveal? Or were they martyrs crushed by envy and power? What began in the deserts of the Holy Land now moves to the courts of Europe, where the clash is not of swords but of ambition. The knights who once faced Saladin and the Mamluks now face something far more insidious, betrayal from within the very world they swore to protect. The Red Cross still lingers, stitched upon their mantles, but it is fading. Their enemies no longer come with scimitars at acres' walls but with parchments, seals, and decrees. The crusade is over. The trial has begun. And from this trial, there will be no return. Paris, 1310. The chill of spring lingers in the air as crowds gather outside the Alta Law site. Word has spread like wildfire, the Knights of the Temple are to be judged. These are not trials held in secret chambers but public spectacles, where accusation and confession mingle with rumor and fear. Once, the sight of a Templar mantle evoked awe, now it draws suspicion, even scorn. Inside the vaulted halls where inquisitors sit, the proceedings unfold with grim ritual. Chains rattle as the accused are brought forward. Priests read out charges of heresy and blasphemy, of spitting on the cross, of worshipping false idols. The words hang in the air, heavy and poisonous. Some knights, broken by torture, repeat confessions they do not believe. Others, trembling yet defiant, proclaim their innocence. The scribes record every word, though truth is buried beneath layers of fear and coercion. Then comes May of 1310. 54 Templars, declared relapsed heretics, are marched from their cells to the fields outside Paris. The pyres are already built, wood piled high, flames waiting to be fed. Witnesses describe the scene. The knights stand straight, mantles torn from their shoulders, but their voices steady. They declare to the crowd that the order is innocent, their vows pure, their faith unbroken. Fire answers their defiance. As the torches touch the wood, pillars of smoke rise to the heavens, carrying their cries into silence. The executions shock Europe. Whispers spread that justice has been twisted into vengeance. Yet the machinery of destruction continues to turn. Pope Clement, pressed and cornered, dissolves the order in 1312. Not by guilty verdict, but by decree, for the good of the Church. A death sentence veiled in formality. 2 years later, in March 1314, the end comes for the last great figures of the Temple. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, and Geoffrey de Charny, preceptor of Normandy, are brought before the people of Paris. Expectation hangs thick in the air. Many believe they will confess once more, paving the way for a merciful sentence. But as the papal cardinals read their charges, something remarkable happens. De Molay, old and weary, raises his voice. He denies the confessions forced upon him, proclaiming instead the innocence of the Temple. His words cut through the crowd like a blade. God knows who is wrong and has sinned. Soon misfortune will come to those who have condemned us without cause. Geoffrey de Charny joins him, affirming the truth with equal resolve. The cardinals are stunned. The script has unraveled. Philip the Fair cannot allow defiance to stand. That same evening, without further trial, both men are led to the stake. On a small island in the Seine, beneath the shadows of Notre Dame, the pyre is lit. Flames curl upward, smoke darkens the sky, and the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar stands unflinching as fire consumes him. Chroniclers say his final words carried not fear, but prophecy that Pope Clement and King Philip would soon stand before the judgment of God. And indeed, within the year, both are dead. Clement dies in April, Philip in November, each suddenly, each without warning. To many, it seems as though the curse of the Templars has fallen, a divine reckoning upon their destroyers. The story spreads, whispered in taverns, preached in sermons, etched into legend. But for the temple itself, there is no resurrection. Its properties are seized, its members scattered. Some find refuge in other orders, others fade into obscurity. The great fortresses are repurposed, their halls echoing with different prayers. The once mighty brotherhood vanishes, leaving behind only ashes and questions. Yet the silence that follows is not an end, it is a beginning of something else. Myths take root in the void left by the temple's destruction. Rumors of hidden treasure, secret knowledge, and relics smuggled away under cover of night begin to weave themselves into the tapestry of Europe's imagination. Did the Templars guard the Holy Grail? Did they uncover secrets beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple? Did they vanish into the shadows, waiting for the world to call them back? The fire on the Seine extinguished the order. But it also lit a flame of mystery that no king, no pope, no executioner could ever put out. From this silence, legend will be born. The pyres of Paris reduced the Templars to ash, but they did not erase them. Instead, they gave birth to something the kings and popes could never control, legend. Out of the silence of their destruction, whispers began to travel across Europe, whispers that have never stopped. Some claim that, on the eve of their arrest, the Templars spirited away their greatest treasures. Chests of gold, relics of saints, even the Holy Grail itself, loaded onto carts under cover of night, carried to hidden vaults or secret harbors. From La Rochelle, it was said, ships set sail into the Atlantic, vanishing into the horizon with fortunes that would never be seen again. The wealth of the temple became not just silver and gold, but the currency of myth. Others spoke of secrets buried beneath the very stones of Solomon's temple, unearthed in the order's earliest days. Scrolls of forbidden knowledge, relics of the Ark, mysteries too dangerous for the Church to admit. These stories grew with every telling, until the Templars were no longer seen merely as warriors or bankers, but as keepers of arcane truths. Centuries rolled on, and the legends only deepened. In Scotland, tales emerged that fugitive knights found refuge after 1314, joining battles against England, their red cross reappearing on misty fields. In Portugal, the Order of Christ rose in their place, carrying forward the Templar spirit under a new name, fueling voyages that would push Europe into the age of discovery. To some, these were not coincidences but proof that the Templars had never truly died, only changed their guise. The Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, then to the Enlightenment, but the Templars remained alive in imagination. Secret societies, from the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons, were accused of inheriting their wisdom. Writers and poets conjured visions of hidden brotherhoods, passing down knowledge in shadows. Even as cathedrals crumbled and monarchies fell, the Red Cross continued to burn in myth. And in every age, treasure hunters and dreamers sought their legacy. From the oak-shrouded pits of Nova Scotia's Oak Island to the dusty vaults of European castles, rumors of Templar gold have lured men to dig, to search, to obsess. Each discovery, real or imagined, adds fuel to the fire. A coin here, a relic there, a carved symbol in stone. Proof, perhaps, that the temple's riches are merely waiting to be found. But perhaps their true treasure was never gold. The Templars embodied something rarer, a brotherhood that spanned nations, bound not by blood but by vow. They created one of the first international networks, wielding power not through kingdoms but through loyalty, discipline, and faith. That legacy shaped the very idea of what a transnational order could be, centuries before the world would give it another name. In the modern age, the Templars have become a canvas upon which each generation paints its fears and fascinations. To some, they are martyrs of faith, betrayed by kings and popes. To others, they are conspirators, guardians of forbidden truths, architects of secret currents in history. Their name has been invoked in revolutions, in manifestos, in novels and films. Always, the line between fact and legend blurs. What remains clear is this: the Templars began as poor knights sworn to protect pilgrims and ended as symbols far larger than themselves. Their rise was meteoric, their fall catastrophic, their afterlife eternal. The stones of Acre may have fallen, the fire of Paris may have silenced their voices, but the echo of the temple still resounds, in myths told by candlelight, in symbols carved into lodges, in the restless imagination of a world forever haunted by their secrecy. And so their story lingers, suspended between history and myth. Were they keepers of divine secrets, or simply soldiers crushed by envy and power? No decree, no execution, no final pyre has ever answered that question. The fire consumed their bodies. The legend made them immortal.